Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Ranking the Albums. We've got in the co-captain's chairs today from the UK, Mr. Andy Edwards, and from Chicago, George Lamie. It's all about fusion today. We're going to circle back on another one of our favorite fusion guitarists, the legendary John McLaughlin. We covered Al Di Meola a few weeks ago. Now we're on Johnny MC, a fantastic player who's played with everybody. He's done the great work with Miles Davis. He's fronted his own band, the Mahavishnu Orchestra. We're not going to include those two acts here, but there's a ton of other great stuff. Solo albums, collaboration, live albums, all sorts of stuff. So we have painstakingly put together a list of our 10 favorites. Even as of this morning, right before we started recording, we're all looking at our list wondering, this could probably change again tomorrow. So rather than keep changing and keep changing and keep changing, we're just going to go with it here today. And I'm sure we each have some honorable mentions. So we're going to have George kick us off with his number 10. We'll go Andy, myself, we'll go round and round till we get to number 1. So George, what do you got at number 10?
Number 10 is 5-piece band. A lot of people probably assumed that when Chick got done with the RTF reunion tour that they were going to go in the studio or maybe do another tour. But instead, he indulges a long-time desire to go out on the road with McLaughlin and do some real playing. They've done duets at Montreux before, and they played on each other's records, but they never did any real playing for a long, long time. So they put together this all-star band, Vinnie Colaiuta, Kenny Garrett, and Christian McBride. They go out on the road, they record this album. At its height, it's incredible, as you would expect. There are moments that you could probably, the Chick wrote an original song, it's 28 minutes long, that kind of drifts. There's a couple of standards at the end that kind of feel like they're added on there, but the rest of it is pretty fierce. It's made up of stuff, recent McLaughlin tunes, and Chick brings in a couple of standards, but yeah, highly intense playing and a great double disc live album, 5-piece band.
I would agree. More on that a little later. Andy, what do you got?
Number 10, I have the 5-piece band. So George, you're right, totally right. Yeah, I think it's a great album. All I can add to what George said is that I think Kenny Garrett is possibly the greatest alto sax player on the planet, and he really plays. So it's not just McLaughlin and Chick. Kenny really is quite incredible on this. And also I think it's In a Silent Way, you get Herbie Hancock as well. So we've got Herbie Hancock, John McLaughlin, Chick Corea, Vinnie Colaiuta. I mean, that's an insane lineup. I think of the recent albums with McLaughlin, I like the live ones more. I think he plays more on the live ones, and he really rips on this. So that's my number 10.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I've changed my order here so many times. I'm like looking at it now, and I'm like, ugh, any of these could rank higher tomorrow or lower or whatever. And it's amazing how a lot of these albums are really, especially the ones that I'm going to talk about, are really different from each other. But I think that's the great thing about his catalog and his playing. So I'm going to go all the way back to 1969 for my number 10, Extrapolation. Could rank higher. I mean, this is like noisy, frantic, free jazz rock type of thing. I mean, John Sermon. This is just, the interesting thing about this album is that it's not just a vehicle for John. This is like, to me, feels like a true band effort. You got Sermon screaming sax, you got Brian Odgers on bass and Tony Oxley on drums. It's raw, like I said, it's bits of free jazz, bits of jazz rock. Pete the Poet is terrific. Arjan's Bag is excellent. Piece is really good. I mean, 2 for 2, a lot of blowing on here. There's not a lot of really nice song structures or anything like that. It's just, if you want to hear, 4 guys just going for it, that's this. And what's really interesting about this album too is McLaughlin's tone, very different on this album. You know, that kind of fuzzy, distorted tone that he would use quite a bit, probably on a lot of the albums we're going to talk about. He's got a very clean sound on here, so it's a little bit different, but his playing is still the same as always. It's just really fierce, really fast stuff. And of course, the technique is shown all over the place. So yeah, I dig this one a lot. Extrapolation, 1969, number 10. Back to George.
And number 9, Electric Guitarist. This is coming on the heels of him shutting down Shakti, wants to go electric again, does a solo album that's total guest star fest. If you're someone that, I know this guy Jack, he hates when there's like a different person on every song. Don't get this then, because this thing, it's just, there's so many people on here. You got the half Mahavishnu reunion on the opening track, New York on My Mind. It's got Goodman and Cobham, as well as Stu Goldberg. Great solo by Stu Goldberg. Friendship is a melodic track with Santana. You got a bebop burner on here with Chick and Stanley Clarke. You know, the voices that we left behind. And then a tune with Jack Bruce and Tony Williams, Are You the One? Maybe the song that went the furthest in his career after this. He brought this back in a couple of different lineups. He apparently really likes that one. Basically, not much to complain about here. One ballad that's a little bit tedious, but really good album. Electric Guitarist.
I would agree. All right, Andy.
At number 9, I've got the John McLaughlin Trio live at the Royal Festival Hall. For me, John McLaughlin sort of breaks into 2 parts. There's the stuff up until the reformation of the Mahavishnu in the 1980s. And then there was a bit of a gap and he seemed to be a bit lost. I don't think he had a deal. And he suddenly there's an announcement that he was going to be playing with this trio. And I actually went to this gig. So when you hear the clapping, that's me on here. So I was at this gig, which is one of the reasons why it's made my top 10. But I do think that this album was John McLaughlin coming back with a really innovative approach. I feel the latter half, the music's excellent, but it doesn't have the pioneering quality of the early stuff, up until the early 80s. But I think this one has still got a really interesting sound. It's basically a trio, John McLaughlin on acoustic guitar, but he's got the sort of photon synthesizer built in. He's got Kai Etgart on bass, who's a really incredible bass player, very funky slap bass player. And then he's got the incredible Trilok Gertu on, is it drums? What does Trilok do? I must mention there's a live album by Trilok Gertu called Bad Habits Die Hard, which I think is one of the great fusion albums. And I think Trilok really just puts a rocket up John on this, and it just doesn't sound like anything else, And it's really the beginning of a lot of the stuff he went on to do after this. There's an album after this called Che Allegria, where he's got Dominic De Piazza on bass, and he's a fantastic bass player, but it hasn't got quite the drive and excitement of this album, I think, because it's live. The tracks opens up with Blue and Green, Miles Davis standard, and then there's a couple of tracks which are off the Mahavishnu reform, like Just Ideas and Josie, which are better here. Florianopolis, which is off the first reformed Mahavishnu album, it's better here. Then there's Pasha's Love, Mother Tongues, Blues for LW. There's some really incredible stuff on here. So that's my number 9.
So I'm fairly new to some of the more recent McLaughlin solo efforts and the Fourth Dimension band, and I quite like them. I agree with Andy, though. I don't think, like, compositionally speaking, that the stuff is quite as memorable, but the playing is absolutely spectacular, I think, and I have a hard time overlooking that. So I'm going to go 2015's Black Light, my number 9, which I think is my favorite out of all of the more recent things. You got Gary Husband on board on various keyboards and drums, Etienne Mepap on bass, Ranjit Barot on drums and vocals. I I always find it interesting how now every album now that has him on it, you have to have at least one song that's got that kind of drum scat thing. I think it's hilarious. Like every album has got like at least one track with that on there, but it's kind of cool for what it is, I guess. But yeah, I like this. This is a lot of good high energy stuff on here. Here come the G's or jizz, however they say it. It just completely burns. Great guitar work. Clap your hand, high energy. Slightly bluesy, slightly funky. I kind of dig that. The drumming on Panjiji is amazing, and then 360 Flip has that kind of drum scat thing, which is kind of cool. But what's really interesting about a lot of these more recent albums is that Johnny still has it, man. Holy cow. It's like, he's got a different tone now. He's using Paul Reed Smith guitars, so he sounds a little different, but it's still him, and the technique is just still there. So yeah, I dig these quite a bit. Speaking of Paul Reed Smith, there it is, one of the many that he has. Gorgeous guitars, but doesn't quite sound like the overdriven Les Paul that he used to play back in the day, but still pretty cool. So that's my number 9, Blacklight. Back to George.
I think he's astonishing now. I just wanted to throw in the fact that I think that band came out of the Floating Point album, which I haven't got in, and it's really worth checking out. I think he met Ranjay Barrow on that session. And a lot of the stuff they're doing with the Fourth Dimension has its roots in Floating Point. That's a really interesting album. Sorry to put it like that while it was in my mind.
Cool.
All right. My number 8 is a tie, because I couldn't really differentiate which of these I like better. They both have their ups and downs. It's The Heart of Things, only studio album, only other album, which is live. They both have their good points and bad points. This has the best song I think this band wrote, which was Mr. DC for Dennis Chambers. They didn't do it on this live album, even though they took it out on tour. I don't know why it's not on here. But this has a couple of tracks that aren't on the album. You got the Gary Thomas composition, The Divide, that's a good one. And the old McLaughlin trio tune, Mother Tongues. And there's an unaccompanied solo by Dennis Chambers on here. So In a Weird Song, a song for Tony Williams called Tony, that's not really a song. There's a keyboard intro, then an unaccompanied drum solo, and then they just come in and close it out. But I think I like the production on this one better. That might be what I would push it over, but really you can't, if you want to hear this band, you can't go wrong with either one of these. The Heart of Things and Live in Paris.
Yeah, I actually brought that one up. That was so close to getting in, mate. I was just nearly had it ready to go, and I think if I was going to pick between the two, it would be this one, because on the studio album, John McLaughlin never seems to solo. Have you noticed? It's like you wait, and Gary Thomas is taking every solo, and then John will come in and he'll solo a little bit, and then it's going, and then he stops. Whereas on here it's the complete opposite. John's all over this album, and the last track I think it's called Acid Jazz. The bit where it just breaks down and he just brings in the most dirtiest distortion with that sort of ring modulation.
Yeah,
and he goes back to like the early 70s. So this one nearly got in. And he would have been there, but instead, it got picked to the post by this Love, Devotion and Surrender, which I've forgotten about. And I said to Pete, I was chatting this morning, I said, I was going through getting all the others, and then I saw this one. I thought, oh my God, I've got to have this. So yeah, an uneven album. It's from the classic Mahavishnu period. McLaughlin's tone and the way he's playing is pure Mahavishnu. Over the top playing. I love A Love Supreme. I think The Life Divine is equal to any Mahavishnu track. I really do. I think it's one of the great moments. It's side 2, Let Us Go Into the House of the Lord. Very long jam, which I don't know why I don't like. It's got all the hallmarks. It's 15 minutes of just them burning. But for me, it just doesn't quite gel as a track, and it's never been one of my favorites. But side 1 of this is absolutely incredible. But this is John McLaughlin, at his peak in terms of guitar playing for me. That sort of berserkoid, out of control, spiritual tone on here. The lineup, you've got Cobham's on Life Divine. It's one of his finest moments on the drums. the incredible Doug Roush on bass, which I don't think gets mentioned enough. One of the great 70s fusion bass players. But yeah, I've got that. Which number are we at now? Was it number 8? Anyway, wherever that's the one I've got there.
Cool. My number 8 is going to be from 2006, Industrial Zen. A lot of guests on this one. I'm assuming your buddy doesn't like this one, George. I mean, some lineup on this album, though. I mean, Chambers, Kaliuda, Farad, Husband, Eric Johnson. I mean, and then some. This is, I'd say, 80% of this is really great. The rest of it's pretty damn good. But for Jaco is killer. It's amazing how many people have done songs like homage to Jaco, and they're generally all pretty good. Just So Only More has got some killer guitar solos on it. To Bop or Not to Be is really good. Dear Dalai Lama is absolutely epic. Really strong effort. You got Senior CS, which also shows up on the 5-piece band album as well, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I like this a lot. I like the production on it. Sounds good. And this, kind of just predates the Fourth Dimension stuff by a few years. But I dig it. One of his good albums from the early 2000s, I think. Thanks, George.
Number 7, Belo Horizonte, 1981. It's a band that, I don't know, maybe you could tell me, Andy, were they called the Translators while they were around? It seems like it only came out after that they started calling them the Translators.
I've seen posters where they're called the Translators,
okay,
when they were gigging. So I was pretty sure that name, I think, came, it was used when the second album came out, the Music Spoken Here album. I think they started to get called that.
There's a song on the follow-up called The Translators.
Yeah.
This is the first one. This is right after the One Truth Band. John going back to acoustic, but it's acoustic mixed in with a band format. He's got the incredible Katia Lebec on keyboards. I believe he was dating her at the time. Tommy Campbell, that guy is a whirlwind on drums. He's incredible. And he hasn't done a whole lot that I know of since then. He's played with Kevin Eubanks, but yeah, he's explosive on this. The kickoff song, Belo Horizonte, they redid it on K Alegria, but this is the version. I mean, this is explosive. It's got a duet with Paco. Basically just a real strong album. If you don't like the acoustic feel, I mean, maybe it wouldn't rank for you, but I really like him on acoustic, so Belo Horizonte for me, number 6.
Yeah, that's a really, really good album. A couple of days ago, Tommy Campbell actually cropped up and dropped a comment on my Facebook page. We were chatting about, so I was chatting to another drummer about something, and he cropped up, and really incredible playing. It's a great band, isn't it? That band. I haven't got it in there, but he just to correct you, George, because I like to correct you, George. He actually married Katia.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah, and if you watch his interview on the Johnny Carson show, I think that's when he's going through the divorce with her, because he moans to Johnny Carson about this divorce he's going through. And I was reading about her the other day, and she apparently lives in a palace now. I don't know whether that's from the Mahavishnu royalties. I doubt it, but anyway, little bit of a background there for you.
I got a deep.
Just think about that, though. John McLaughlin on the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
You would never see a guy like McLaughlin on one of these late night shows today. Never.
He's bizarre. He's sat next to Grace Jones, and he's getting divorce advice from Grace Jones on the Tonight Show.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Well, it's my go, isn't it? So number 7.
Yep.
There we go. Extrapolation. I think this is an absolutely incredible album. Couple of things you could ask yourself, what is the greatest British jazz album ever made in Britain? In terms of influence on music, which is the greatest British jazz album? I'm sure people would argue with me, but I would probably go for this. This is a pretty important British album, and all the sort of, when people talk about the first fusion album, this isn't quite fusion, but all the elements are there. I'm fascinated by the fact that John McLaughlin sort of arrives in London in 1960-61, and then he starts working with the people that are going to create rock music. You know, he's working with Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones, Ginger Baker, Jack Bruce, you know, and he's with Graham Bond, and he's in a pressure cooker. And I think, you know, as much as John McLaughlin gets labeled as jazz, I see him in the same category as Led Zeppelin or Cream or Hendrix. You know, I think there was a pressure cooker. I've got friends who were actually in that scene in London in the early 60s, and I think it was really fertile time. And what I see is that this is being the sort of result of all that. You know, it's a really special album. It's hard to categorize. It's, you know, it's not a pure jazz album. I think at the time it would have seemed very rocky, and it's pretty out there, but not as out there as Where Fortune Smiles. If you do like this, it's well worth checking out John Sermon's Where Fortune Smiles is, which I think is probably McLaughlin at his most free. Yeah, brilliant album.
Yeah.
So,
You know, it's interesting your comment about the first true like British jazz album. Do you remember? I'm trying to think. The first Nucleus album, what year that was? Had to have been right around that same time, right?
It's around that same time, isn't it? So I think it's just it's a couple of years before, it's around about 69, 70. Yeah. I think that one's recorded 68, 69.
Another great band, man. Ian Carr's Nucleus. Oof, good stuff there.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Number 7. Again, I had a hard time with where to put this one on the list, but I do like it quite a bit. 1979's Electric Dreams with the One Truth Band, comprised of the great Stu Goldberg on keyboards, you know, Fernando Saunders, Tony Smith, El Shankar. Good stuff here. Now, it's not quite Mahavishnu, but it's got its moments. I think Miles Davis is a great song on here. I love how him and Miles both named songs after each other, which I think was pretty cool. The Electric Dreams, Electric Sighs is a really good song. I love Desire and the Comforter, which has some really good Moog solos from Goldberg on it. The Dark Prince is just absolutely savage. That's probably my favorite moment on the album. And again, that's got Moog solos all over the place. The Unknown Dissident is also a great track. I like this. I think, you know, there's a couple tracks that are a little on the laid back side, but I think he was heading back into the right direction on this one. And I almost wish he did more with this band, but good stuff. Number 7.
Couldn't you say that about every band? I almost wish he did more with them.
You're absolutely right, George.
He doesn't stick with anything.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. Because I mean, to me, that could have been his next great kind of band after Mahavishnu, but that was that.
But he got dropped. I think that's what happened. If you think he would, but who was he with in the 70s? Is it CBS?
Yeah.
You know, Columbia CBS has got one of the best deals going. They really made the Mahavishnu Orchestra, backed him up all the way down, put up with Shakti. He brings that album out, and then the next thing he's dropped, and he's over in France and picking up, you know, there. And I think that's what happened. I think if he hadn't been dropped, it could have been a different story altogether.
Yeah, you're probably right. All right, George, what do you got for number 6?
My number 6, Andy mentioned, Floating Point.
Brilliant album.
Yeah, just real good solo effort. The first time he hooks up with Ranjit Bharat in India. It's a very Indian slant on this, mixed with Western music. Raju, one of the better tracks on here, that they open the 5-piece band album with that. But yeah, a bunch of good tunes on here. And it did kind of serve as the blueprint going forward for Fifth Dimension, who initially had Mark Mondesir on drums, but then Bharat ended up in there. So yeah, this was an important step for where he's gone from this point, which is 2007 until now. Floating Point.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's a brilliant album. Have you seen the DVD that goes with that, George? John McLaughlin made I think it's not called Meeting of the Spirits, it's something like that. But when he was forming Shakti, the Indian musicians weren't able to really understand the fusion aspects, but by the time he got to Floating Point, they did, and he was able to bring in Indian classical musicians who could, you know, actually improvise within a fusion setting. And there's some incredible solos from the sitar players.
Oh yeah.
that just put a guitarist to shame. You cannot believe the licks that they're doing, and that's why I love that album so much. Really, really could have made my top 10, but instead, at my top 10 is I've got this, My Goals Beyond. This isn't the original cover. This is the Electra Musician reissue from 1982. I really wish I had the original on vinyl. This album, the side one with all the acoustic guitar solo pieces, I think is absolutely John McLaughlin at his best. I think, and so influential as well. You know, when you look at sort of that ECM sound where you get a whole album of solo instrumentation, I think that has its roots on this album. The only thing that stopped this from going to number one for me was the other side, side two. There's two tunes, piece one and piece two, and it's the beginnings of the Mavish Nocturne. He's got Jerry Goodman and Billy Cobham on, along with Dave Liebman. He's got Charlie Hayden on bass, Ayetu on percussion, Badelroy on tabla. It's a really incredible lineup. But those tunes, I'm not saying I hate them, they just don't fire me up that much. I never really was that interested in those. But you know, but the acoustic stuff on here is so influential. So, for example, I think this is the album that Jeff Beck heard that made him go down the fusion route. I did want to bring this in at this point, is this album here. It's quite a rare one. Joe Farrell, made exactly the same year. Joe Farrell, the lineup is Chick Corea, David Holland, Jack DeJohnette, John McLaughlin, and there's two tunes on here. John's not on the whole album, but there's two tunes, Follow Your Heart and Song of the Wind, and if Emotion. That's it. If those two had been on side two, then that would be my number one there. It's just peak McLaughlin. So I don't know, it's a bit of a cheat, but I thought I'd bring this in because people don't know that album, but it's a really fantastic album.
Yeah, I've never heard it.
There we go.
Cool. All right, this one might be somewhat of a cheat here, I guess. Technically not, but in 2018, John did an album with the Fourth Dimension Band and Jimmy Herring and the Invisible Whip live in San Francisco. It's kind of cheating because they're basically playing, you know, Mahavishnu stuff on here, but it's absolutely incredible to hear both these bands together. I mean, Jimmy Herring is a terrific guitar player also, and seeing these two guys together is pretty spectacular. I mean, you know, there they are, and it's great to hear someone playing these songs again. I mean, you know, Meeting of the Spirits, Birds of Fire, Lotus and Irish Streams, Dance of the Maya, Trilogy, Earthship, Eternity's Breath, Parts 1 and 2, Be Happy. It's a killer lineup, killer track list, a great sounding live album. I couldn't leave it off. I was going to, only because like, wow, it's all Mahavishnu stuff. And I said, screw it, I'm going to put it on there. So there you go. Live in San Francisco. We may be going to San Francisco again before we're done here today. So back to George.
Is this 4, 5?
5.
5. Number 5 is Blacklight. Like Pete said, mostly intense. A couple more moody numbers, but me, I love the Fourth Dimension. Other than Mahavishnu, this is, I think, the lineup that probably John has done the most with. I mean, yeah. He obviously loves these guys. Yeah, Here Come the G's. Pangitti. He's got the tribute to Paco El Hombre Casabia. I mean, just a great lineup, great album. All these albums are good, but yeah, this one's really good. Blacklight.
Cool.
Yeah, I definitely would back that up. That I think that's the best of the Fourth Dimension albums. So it's my number 5, Shakti. The first Shakti album. I haven't brought the Remember Shakti stuff in to this because some of those would have made it as well, and I didn't want my top 10 to just be full of Shakti. But I think after the Mahavishnu, his greatest creative achievement is Shakti. I think it's incredible achievement. I think it's just a little bit esoteric for the Mahavishnu fans, but I think it's absolutely incredible. This one, the first one's recorded live. And it's John McLaughlin at his most brutal on acoustic guitar. on here. Really, really vicious. Joy, which opens up side one, has probably got one of the most complex melodies he's ever written. It's absolutely, and it just seems to go on for about 4 minutes of just the most horrendously hard guitar playing. I didn't put any of the guitar trio in. I didn't put Friday Night in San Francisco in, because for me, in terms of John McLaughlin's acoustic playing, it's the Shakti albums, and this, in terms of his actual playing, is the most brutal. It's a live recording from the 70s. I'm never too keen on the actual sound of this album. Shakti, you really want to hear the pristineness of the beauty of the acoustic instruments, and it's a bit muddy. It's a real minor moan, but it was always an issue with me. But yeah, in terms of his guitar playing, this is some of the most insane guitar playing you'll hear. It's on that one. That's my number 5.
My number 5, 5-piece band. I'll echo everything George said. Yeah, it's a little on the long side, but I don't mind it. And when it burns, it completely burns. Kenny Jarrett is amazing on here. I mean, just really, really great stuff. It's great to hear Chick and John playing together on this. Yeah, I mean, Raju, so good. New blues, old brews. The whole thing is good. It does ramble a little in spots, but man, it's just such a joy to hear this lineup playing together. And Vinny Colaiuta, what a drummer. Yeah, it's good stuff. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. That's my number 5.
Well, if you were cheating, I'm cheating. Live in San Francisco. It's just irresistible. I mean,
yeah,
just for the material, but then it's great sound on this record.
Yeah.
Great to hear the double band. You get the double drummers, double guitars all the way down the line, double bass players. Obviously, the material carries it, but yeah, the playing just, Jimmy Herring stands right there with John. He's just slugging with him completely. They did a 2-night stand here on this tour. I went both nights, sitting in different places, just got the whole feel of it. It's completely great. Supposedly it's going to be his last time playing here. We'll see about that. I'm never too sure when people say that. I'm not doing this anymore. We'll see. But yeah, highly recommend it.
Someone throws a couple bucks his way to do a small tour, I bet you he'll be doing it. Right?
You never know.
Yeah, you never know. Never say never. All right, Andy, you're number 4.
My number 4 is Electric Guitarist. Yeah, we've mentioned it before. It's an incredible lineup, but for me, it's also got that 70s John McLaughlin electric sound. And on his solo albums, there aren't that many to pick where you get that. But on here, you get it in buckets. And I always felt that this album and Electric Dreams has got some of his best electric guitar playing on ever. I think he's playing on Do You Hear the Voices That You Left Behind is just astonishing. Someone could operate an electric guitar with distortion like that over those sort of chord changes. It's absolutely incredible. So yes, and there we go. There's the inside of the vinyl.
That's a lot of people on one.
Yeah,
album.
yeah. The all-star cast of all-star.
Yeah, you're mate with that, George.
All right, my number 4. Again, this could have been higher. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, oof, this is a pretty savage album. 1970s Devotion. I mean, Larry Young on organ, Billy Rich on bass, Buddy Miles on drums, John on guitar. That's a pretty potent lineup right there. This is just in your face, heavy kind of. This is like John McLaughlin doing his like Cream impersonation, sort of, but with organ. The title track is just 11 minutes of like violent soloing. Dragon Song is heavy, kind of like, to me, like kind of like an extension of that first Lifetime album. That also is what reminds me of here. What else? Wah-wah solos all over the place. You got the totally psychedelic rock of Marbles, which you would never think John McLaughlin would do something like that, but it's totally from that time. Siren's got this dirty, distorted organ. Don't Let the Dragon Eat Your Mother. Absolutely killer. And to me, that song foreshadows Mahavishnu completely. Purposeful When ends the album. I mean, it's just a crushing, furious album. As uncommercial as it gets. It's amazing how many albums he did right around this period that, like, yeah, nobody's going to buy this shit, right? But looking back on it now, it's pretty groundbreaking stuff. So yeah, I dig this a lot. Number 4, Devotion.
You know, that one was produced by Alan Douglas, that also did a lot of the later Hendrix stuff. You know, the guy that overdubbed on Hendrix sessions and all that sort of stuff. He also did My Goals Beyond, but with that album, John McLaughlin went and did the sessions, and he went off on tour, and then he looks in the shops and it had been released, and Alan Douglas had taken the tracks and basically mixed it himself, added all that psychedelic, cut bits out, edited it all together. John McLaughlin really wasn't happy, so he sort of disowned that album a little bit. And so I've always had mixed feelings about it, but I do really like it, because I think
It's really good.
that psychedelic insanity that Alan Douglas did to it puts it in its own brackets, all of itself. You could really tell he was trying to market him as the next Hendrix. You know, he thought, I've got the next Hendrix here, you know, and he's really trying to make it sound like that. I've always felt Buddy Miles was a little bit out of his depth on that, though.
Yeah.
That was he really, if he'd got Colm on that, I think that would have been the beginnings of the Mavish Orchestra. But yeah, it's a fantastic album.
True.
My number 3, I had this way lower, and I've moved, you know, listening to these albums again, I've moved it up because I just can't find any flaws with it. Live at Royal Festival Hall. So after the Mahavishnu Mark IV, he starts doing acoustic duo dates with the bass player, Jonas Hellborg. He gets the idea to do an acoustic band again. So they get Trilacher to Indo-Jazz percussionist. Hellborg moves out for Jeff Berlin. John and Jeff Berlin don't get along. Hellborg comes back. Hellborg's not the long-term answer, so he talks to Gary Burton, and he gets recommended Kayak Hart from Berkeley. This album, they go out on the road. They're doing a mixture of the Mahavishnu stuff and some new stuff, a Trilock tune. First thing that strikes me is the production. Production's incredible. And then John, a lot of times, doesn't have the best sound, but on this, with this photon synth on the acoustic, it's no flaws here. The sound is incredible. Trilock, his setup sounds like nobody's setup. He's an incredible player. I mean, this album has it all. They, as usual, John is not satisfied. They do one more studio album, and then he breaks it up again to do Free Spirits, which is a good band, but for me, the disappointing, broke it up early lineup in his career is John McLaughlin Trio. So, Royal Festival Hall.
There is a third album, George, called Molom.
That's that band? I thought it was.
Yeah, it's not. It hasn't got the bass player, but it's Trilock and John made around about the same time. I've got Molom, and it's very, very good actually. It's obviously a film soundtrack. It's not a studio album so it's very laid back. But if you do like the sound of that, you know, it's an interesting album to get. You know, and I was at that gig, like I said earlier, and Royal Festival Hall's like a classical venue. You could hear a pin drop. I was quite far back, and as soon as they came out and played, it was just absolutely incredible sound. I mean, I can remember it to this day, and it's like 33 years ago. You know, first time I'd seen John, and that was a memorable night. Yeah. So, what we at now? We're at number 3, aren't we? That's yeah. The second Shakti album I've got a number 3. All the Shakti albums are in here. I absolutely love Shakti. I think they're incredible. This one is very much like the first album. It's not quite as ferocious, but it's beautifully recorded, and you can really hear the quality of the acoustic instruments on here. Some really long solos on here. Like I said, not quite as ferocious as the first. Yeah, so I don't know what else to say. You know, this to me, Shakti are equal to the Mahavishnu Orchestra, really sublime band. I nearly had this one higher, but I've gone for Natural Elements. There's the best one, which I'll talk about when I get there. Yeah, but that's one of John's best, I think.
All right, my number 3, back to collaboration time. I had to include this album, and we talked about it quite a bit on the Di Meola episode. But Friday Night in San Francisco, 1981, absolutely acoustic shredding at its very best. Di Meola, De Lucia, and McLaughlin, absolutely stunning. I actually got to see Di Meola, McLaughlin, and Borelli Legrand at the end of the 80s in New York City, and that was that was really mind-blowing. It was the only time I ever got to see John, actually. But yeah, this is legendary. I'm pretty stoked that they're going to be releasing a Saturday night at some point. So yeah, just incredible. All three guys just burning it up. Amazing. Back to George.
My number 2 is Now Hear This. Probably a time and place thing for me. When this album came out, it just hit the spot. It wore it out. It's great playing on it. Riff Raff, one of my favorite John songs in a long time. Call and Answer, another one. I saw them out in North Carolina at the Abstract Logics Festival. Saw this band, and they did a tribute set to John. Afterwards, all the bands that were on the fest came out and played. Just a great album. If you're missing the recent McLaughlin stuff, I see a lot of people in the comments say, "Oh, I lost track of them." Bad move. I mean, these records are good. They're not going to be what you know. They're not Mahavishnu, but they're the closest he's gotten since then, I think. So Now Hear This.
And you know, I'm one of those guys. I just kind of like stopped buying the McLaughlin stuff like, you know, a long time ago, and I've really enjoyed getting acquainted with these.
They're fiery.
Yeah, they definitely are. So yeah, listen to George, folks. Go check these albums out. They're really good.
Was that when you saw them live? Was that still in Mark Monder's ear?
Yeah, it was Mondesir. Yeah.
Ranjit
was there because Ranjit's band played Human Element. They played also, so he was there and he came out and played with them later. But yeah, it was Mark Mondesir.
Yeah, I followed Mark Mondesir since the late 80s. I think he's one of the greatest British jazz drummers that's ever lived. Absolutely incredible drummer.
Yeah.
And I've seen him in so many incarnations. I've met Mark and spoken to him. Such a Mahavishnu fan. And so it's incredible that he ended up, you know, playing with him. And I was sort of a bit disappointed when he stopped doing the band. You know, I would have loved to see what Mark had done, because I don't think he still has done what he could do. I don't know what he was like live when you saw him, but he's an absolutely astonishing drummer.
He was great.
And Mark, if you are watching, I know you're not very well at the moment, and I really, you know, sending all my positive vibes to you, you know, but like I can't go on about that guy. Really incredible player.
I know him from when Kevin Eubanks went to Blue Note and started doing those acoustic albums. He had Mark and he had Marvin Smith, and they're both volcanic. I mean,
yeah, they both, yeah,
great players.
Yeah.
Cool. Andy, you're number 2.
My number 2, which would be my favorite electric guitar album by John McLaughlin, is that one. I absolutely love this album. I really do. I think it gets bad press. I don't think people realize how good it is. And I think the reason for that is possibly because of the track Love and Understanding, which has got that vocal on it, which is so horrendous. I can remember when I first bought this, I listened to side 1. I thought, this is pretty good. Put on side 2. When that track came on, I almost like instantly hated it. And I put it on the other day. I thought, it's about 50 seconds of singing. Actually, Love and Understanding is pretty ripping, and it's got some really cool riffs on there, you know. But I just think he's incredible. Like you say, The Dark Prince, that's possibly John McLaughlin's finest hour on guitar.
Yeah.
You cannot believe a human being can play the guitar like that, you know. There's on Electric Dreams, Electric Sighs, there's that banjo solo. Do you remember that? The John McLaughlin banjo solo. He just does loads of different things on here, you know. Miles Davis is really sort of electric. Miles, you know, sort of modal and twitchy. You know, The Unknown Distant is a beautiful John McLaughlin melody. Like I said, The Dark Prince is full out. Desire and the Comforter is really funky, and there's just so much great John McLaughlin guitar playing. If you listen to the bootlegs and you go through, I think John McLaughlin's guitar playing was at its peak at this point. The One Truth Band live were vicious. They were like the Mahavishnu Orchestra, they really were. And it's a shame there wasn't well, there is a live album on the Montreux box set, but even I haven't got that. Even I can't afford that. Have you got that, George?
I got some of it as files.
Yeah.
I don't have that.
Not the One Truth Band, yeah. I think it's on video. I've been checking out the videos last night. Incredible band, because of course the One Truth band live was slightly different to this one. But yeah, that's my number 2, and I cannot recommend this album. I think it really needs to be reevaluated. You know, I think it's one of the great fusion albums.
Yeah, it's quite good. All right, my number 2, Love, Devotion, Surrender. I mean, to me, this is both of these guys, I think, at their peak. And, you know, Carlos is just coming off not too long ago before this, the Caravanserai album, which is just absolutely terrific. And I mean, I Love Supreme just absolutely kills on here. You know, you got Doug Rauch and Jan Hammer and Michael Shreve and Lewis and Peraza and Elias and Young and Cobham. I mean, this is just a great lineup. I don't mind the big, long, rambling "Let Us Go Into the House of the Lord." I just love its just relentlessness. I think it's just great jams. To me, that song is kind of like an extension of the Caravanserai album, but just with double the guitar, right? I wish this album was longer. You know, it's 38 minutes long, goes by really quick. I wish they would have done like another one, just the two of them like this. I know they played some stuff together afterwards, but yeah, I love this. It's just, it's unstructured, loads of jams, but I love it for it. So,
Pete, have you got that? That is the Bill Laswell remix of Illuminations and Love, Devotion, Surrender. It's like a dub mix.
Because I have them both separately, but I don't have that. No.
Yeah, and he's basically, Bill Laswell got the master tracks, you know, and he was able to remix it. He was able to clean up all the audio, but then he remixes it as well. And it's pretty astonishing. You only on here, it's all mixed in with Illumination. So you have some of Illuminations and you have some of Love, Devotion, and Surrender. And it's like a dub reggae album. It's in certain points, it's absolutely incredible. Yeah, if you're a fan of Love, Devotion, Surrender, this is essential. I'll just open it up so you can see. It's done like Lotus, you know. So it all opens out like this.
Oh wow, okay.
And this was, if there was more McLaughlin on it, this would have been definitely in my top 10. The only thing is that on the Life Divine, he's like doing a mix, and he actually mixes John McLaughlin's guitar solo completely out. And it's just drums, it's just Cobham with all these effects, you know, but it doesn't replace Love, Devotion, and Surrender whatsoever, but it's an incredible companion. But to hear them produced properly with modern production techniques is quite astonishing.
Very cool. All right, number 1, George, what do you got?
My number 1 is 2006's Industrial Zen. Ever since it came out, I just love this record. It was like John really it wasn't very active in the early part of the 2000s. He comes out with this, and he's got all these hot young players. This is the introduction of Hadrian Furrow. He hadn't been active before this. He's on 2 tracks. And just the songwriting, he's invigorated. He's got his nephew, Tony Gray's on bass. Matt Garrison's back from Heart of Things. You got Chambers, you got Kyle Yuta, Eric Johnson. Just the songs are very good. The production's good. It's a little clinical sounding. I think the producer gets a little full of himself on a couple of tracks. There's one track he actually has drum machine next to all these other drummers. I think that was a misstep, but other than that, I mean, it's a great record. Wayne's Way is probably the best song on here. That song's incredible. Check it out. Industrial Zen, 2006.
Good one.
I think that's definitely one of my favorites from the 2000s era. I think that's the best one. I think Bill Evans is incredible on there. You know, the first track, and I just wonder why the Reform Mahavishnu in the 80s didn't sound like that. I mean, you got Bill Evans then, and you got, you know, I just don't get it, you know. So anyway, my number 1 is Natural Elements by Shakti. I think when John McLaughlin formed Shakti, obviously it was a real big seller, and the record company didn't want him to do this, you know. The first album's recorded at the same time as Inner Worlds. I think it's almost in the same month those albums were recorded, and I find Inner World's a really difficult album to listen to because you can tell John McLaughlin's heart's not in it. His heart's in Shakti, And I think these 3 albums are after the Mahavishnu were his great artistic achievement. But the record company, you know, they wanted more from him. And I think on this album, which doesn't get rated that highly, they make it slightly more commercial and pull the jams down to more bite-sized tunes. So rather than just getting 2 tracks aside, you know, you've got sort of 5 or 6 tracks aside. But it's just some of John McLaughlin's best compositions on here. Mind Ecology, Face to Face. I think that's one of my all-time favorite compositions by John McLaughlin. Come On Baby, Dance With Me. Really commercial, really easy to listen to, but also massively heavy. So it's that, I think it's that mixture of commerciality with Shakti. You know, it's just an absolutely perfect album. When I did the list, I didn't expect this to come out at number 1. I knew Shakti would be in there, but every time I put it, you know, I thought, no, this album's absolutely perfect. And Get Down and Shruti on side 2 is just, I don't know what the hell they're doing on it. And John McLaughlin goes into a guitar solo and every note is mirrored identically by the percussion. So you're thinking, is this written out or is it improvised? If it's written out, how are they remembering all this? Because these guys don't read. If it's not written out, how are they able to play this, you know, psychically? There's stuff on here which is absolutely incredible, and you just won't get it anywhere else on any other album. So that's my number 1, Natural Elements by Shakti.
All right, all different number 1s. This is fantastic. 1978 Electric Guitarist. I love this album quite a bit. Tons of guests. I don't mind it though, because everybody you want to hear on a John McLaughlin album, they're here basically, right? Well, it's like this is like the biggest all-star band ever assembled. New York on My Mind, so good, kind of bluesy. Love the violin of Jerry Goodman on this. Friendship, again, that's Carlos and John jamming again. Love it. Got David Sanborn going head to head with McLaughlin on Every Tear from Every Eye, which I think is brilliant. Do You Hear the Voices That You Left Behind? Love it. Absolutely love it. I love the kind of reunion of the Lifetime lineup with Jack Bruce and Tony and John, which is really good. Yeah, I dig this a lot. Again, I just wish it was longer. Another really short album, you know, 7 tracks. What is it? 34 minutes long, 38 minutes long, something like that. But a lot of surprises, a lot of different styles and themes, musical themes going on here. But I think that's basically because he got so many different players on it. But I dig it. I dig it a lot. It's my number 1. George, you got any honorables?
No, I didn't really pull any honorables. Yeah, skip me. I can't think of anything.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Andy?
I have. And you know I'm a big John McLaughlin fan, and I didn't want to just bring in all the other albums, which I nearly did. So I thought, what shall I go for? I'm sure nobody's heard, which is a real masterpiece. And I could have easily put it in the top 10, except it's a collaboration, really. Not many people know this album. Zakir Hussain, Making Music, from I think 1987. This is absolutely fantastic, really is. George, if you like live at, you know, Raw Festival Hall, then, you know, check this one out. See if there's anything. Oh, they've just got lots of photos there from the session. Oh yeah, so the lineup: Zakir Hussain tabla, Hari Prasad Chausariya, who's an Indian classical flute player. He actually crops up on the Remember Shakti album on the first one. John McLaughlin on guitar, and Jan Garbarek on tenor and soprano saxophones. This album is just very, very beautiful, very tasteful. It's on ECM Records. As you
I was just going to say, it looks exactly like an ECM album, right? Yep.
You know, beautifully recorded. And what I found is people I know who don't like John McLaughlin, who find it too much, you know, it's too much fast speed and it's too clinical. They often really love this album. And I said, well, go and check Making Music out when they come back. You know, John McLaughlin's playing absolutely beautiful. It's 1987 and there's not really, this is the only album from that period. You know, you've got stuff late 80s and then you've got stuff up to the Adventures in Radioland. And he's a bit of a loss here, which is probably why he ended up doing this session. But yeah, I could have easily had this in the top 10. So if you don't know, it's really brilliant. You know, if you like Shakti, and essential, but it's not like Shakti. It's much more jazz, you know, and really interesting to hear John McLaughlin and Jan Garbrick teamed up together. Probably didn't know that ever happened, but yeah.
For me, I mean, this is technically not great and it could have been a lot better, but I wanted to mention it just because it's the trio of doom, right? It's like, McLaughlin, Jocko, and Tony Williams, you know, and covering and all sorts of great stuff on here. You got Dark Prince on here, Continuum, Para Oriente. I mean, just Are You the One? Are You the One? This is just jamming, blowing. I mean, it's like, and you know, you could arguably say that the three of them aren't at their best, probably because I think this was put together so quickly. But imagine if they had time to really prepare and, you know, do a proper show or tour or whatever. It's still pretty amazing for what it is, I think. But I did want to mention that we mentioned this one before, Where Fortune Smiles. This is just out of control, avant-garde free jazz. I mean, if you want to hear McLaughlin in that sort of a framework with dueling it out with two sax players, that's pretty crazy. And let's see what else. I actually like his most recent Liberation Time. It's pretty strong, you know, a couple throwaway tracks, but the stuff that's good on here is really, really good. And then this is pretty good. Live at Ronnie Scott's current band. And then I did want to mention 2 to 1, which is another one with the Fourth Dimension, which I kind of like quite a bit. So there you have it. You know, I think we gave everybody a nice cross representation of the McLaughlin catalog outside of Mahavishnu, outside of his work with Miles. So pretty good. I think you guys have lots of homework to do to go check all this stuff out. So thanks for watching, everybody. Andy, what's going on? What news on your end on the music front and everything like that? What do you got?
What am I doing at the moment? We're just about to put the finishing touches to the next Rain album. So I'm in the studio pulling that together. I've got gigs with Quill, you know, this month. Coming back after COVID, it's hard to get these gigs off the ground. Yeah, there we go. And I'm working a lot on my own YouTube, you know, trying to think where that's going to go and where I'm going to take it this year. You know, that seems to be growing, you know, in great part, and great thanks, Pete, for having me on, because every time I check my analytics, it's always from here that they're coming. So, you know, all the Sea of Tranquility fans out there who are the jazz fusion end, you know, come over to me now.
Here you go.
Yeah, I'm getting deep into the jazz fusion, deep and deep, you know. So yeah, I'm looking to doing some interviews. I'll have to get hook up with George, because he's the mastermind with all this, isn't he? Really.
Happy to do it.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. Yeah.
Cool. So there you have it, everybody. In the comments below, please list your favorite 5 or 10 or 20 John McLaughlin albums. And it'll be interesting to see what people come up with down there. And after you do that, go visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. Check us out on Facebook. Check us out on Twitter. But more importantly, we're here together on YouTube all the damn time. Stay tuned. Coming up, tomorrow. Hudson Valley Squares happening tomorrow. We've got another 1982 album war coming at you. Black Sabbath's Live Evil going up against Ozzy Osbourne's Speak of the Devil. It's the killer live album battle, so do not miss that. Tuesday, we've got in the Prague seat, we've got a kind of a new show theme, favorite and least favorite lineup, and everybody on the panel is going to be picking their favorite and least favorite lineup from King Crimson. So kind of going and tackling bands that had lots of lineup changes. So that's coming up on Tuesday. Wednesday, new album review day. Thursday, the Monsters. Then Friday morning, the Funhouse with Martin Popoff. Saturday, we've got the UK Connection with Simon Bray and Stephen Reed. And then back here on Sunday with album homework assignment. Next week, we've got Chuck Alvarez from In the Prague Seat going up against Jason Morris. So stay tuned for that. And a lot more for Andy Edwards and George Lamie. I am Pete Pardo. Have a good rest of your weekend, everybody. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.